A massive thanks goes out to Be Quiet, Corsair, Eco Water Blocks, InWin and Sapphire for sponsoring our coverage at Computex 2019.
Hello folks, and we're here now at Bitspower's booth over in Nangang, and we're going to be taking a look at some of the new stuff that they've got coming out. Now obviously Bitspower has been in the news a little bit recently thanks to HydroX, because they're going to be making all of the fittings for Corsair, but of course they've got all their new stuff. So let's take a look through that, and apologies in advance if the audio goes a bit crazy. We've got G-Skill having some crazy shouting match over next to us, so it's probably going to be coming through a little bit, so bear with us on that. Nothing we can do, I'm afraid. Basically, a lot of the stuff that they've done is they've reworked the various designs and updated their range. So you see we've got some really interesting patterns that they're going to be putting sort of 3D milling jobs into a lot of their blocks. So we've got the concept CPU blocks here, which have like a pitted, sandblasted finish. Really interesting. I've not really seen that sort of pattern work before. I know EK did some triangular work, but now this is a very smooth, organic kind of shape. I think it's really exciting, and it's not something you see very often. And they've carried it through not only for this one, but this concept GPU block over here. Now, in terms of the more standard blocks, you're going to have a new Radeon 7 block, so if you've got one of those, you're going to have support from Bitspower for that. And then sort of working through, we've got more support for the sort of RGB ecosystems, full 5-volt addressable RGB, that sort of thing. Just making sure that your lighting, of course, is up to date and RGB, all the things. We've also got some new mirror type finish acrylic blocks that I find are really interesting. So what they've done is they've used a mirror finish acrylic, much like the distro plate that I made for our 1000D build quite a while ago. And that's going to have some really interesting lighting effects and different options. So if you're going to be maybe doing a vertical bracket GPU and you want the block to be as on show as you possibly can, I think these could be really quite interesting. And so they've taken this honeycomb hex mesh pattern and applied it not only to the GPU blocks, but also to a range of the CPU blocks, which are also going to be updated. Now, interestingly enough, we're not just dealing with lots of RGB here, so we've actually got traditional fans. Would you believe it? No RGB on future fans. These ones, in fact, are actually going to be targeted at maximum performance. So the idea here is they've got these extra little blades that go around the fan hub. Now, of course, the fan hub is in the center where it's going to have the lowest angular momentum, speed, angular rotation. So you tend to get a lower sort of a pressure drop zone in the middle of that. So having these extra blades is said to increase the CFM. So these are meant to be super radiator fans, and they're meant to be able to push 60 CFM at 1800 RPM. Now, whether or not that's deafeningly loud, or if it actually is that figure, we don't really know. We can't test them yet. Maybe we'll get some to do that, who knows. The tricky thing with fan specs is they tend to be wildly different at all different specs, so best don't listen to them, just work with actual experience and just assume that a good fan, more radiators than you need, tends to be the best way to do it. Of course, we do also have some RGB fans. They've got LED rings around the outside just to be keeping it nice and simple. No crazy need for extra controllers, that sort of thing, just straight up working. Now, one of the interesting things that I've seen here as well is this interesting block here. So this is for a 2080, and instead of having the ports in the traditional spot, which is like on the top on a terminal, they've actually got them at the end. So this way the tubes come out at the end, sort of closer to where the power connectors are. Now, I'm not seeing that very used at all. We've obviously had some EK stuff where it's been going around the back onto the motherboard, but that's incredibly specific. Same thing with the Bitspower one for that. These ones coming around the back, very interesting. Perhaps that's the sort of thing which will work very well for distro plates, because obviously if your ports are now in that location, they're not going to be changing because that's relative to your PCIe slot. So I'm assuming if they're going to be having more distro plates in the future that maybe go on the front of cases, like the Lianli PCO11D, which has a lot for there, then this sort of block could be very interesting for those. Now, let's pop around the corner. We've also got some more stuff over there, such as all the monoblocks, and we can take a look at those. So here you'll see a wall of monoblocks. So we've got whole support for the X570 boards that are coming out, along with some of the higher end MSI X299 boards and all of that kind of thing. This one's an absolute beast over here for the ROG Rampage 6 Extreme Omega. It's huge, but it's still not as big as these ones over here. So these are for the Gigabyte C621 and Asus ROG Dominance Extreme, those boards, and they're absolute beasts. I can't even imagine how much that one weighs. It's solid metal all the way through. But these blocks obviously are absolutely sort of off the wall in terms of the top end hardware, and they're just absolutely crazy. One of the things that has caught my eye though is these GPU blocks. So these are sort of like the Lotan type ones that you've actually seen around already. And one of the things that I'm interested in is the fact that they actually have swappable cold plates on them. So the idea here is that you can keep the top acrylic section and swap just the cold plate, because all of the flow and interior parts are handled by an injection molded piece. Now, I've actually used one of these blocks already in a previous NVIDIA rig, and I actually didn't know that, so that's really quite interesting to find out. Of course, they all have full 5-volt addressable RGB headers and LEDs running throughout, so you've got all of those kind of updated goodies. And then just the fact that the idea is if you maybe swap graphics cards in the future, you can keep the top acrylic and just buy the cold plate separately, attach it in place so you don't have to go with the entire block, which I think is quite interesting. The acrylic top tends not to be the most expensive part on a block, so maybe you're not going to be saving a huge amount of cash on it, but it's an interesting concept and it's certainly a little bit different. And actually, I've had my grievances with a lot of injection molding. You've probably seen on the previous videos if you've watched any of those. I quite like the way it's used here, just because it's actually not used in place of acrylic, it's used to supplement it. So they have a layer in between the top layer of acrylic and the copper cold plate, and then it basically just keeps the coolant in place and flowing between that. And from my personal experience using them, they tend to be very, very clear, and it makes the finish sort of much more vibrant. But all in all, big refresh, trying to make sure there's support for all the new cards, the new motherboards, CPUs, all of that, because we've had a lot of that at Computex this year. And we're really looking forward to getting our hands on some of it.